A swastika flies from the top of the Brandenburg Gate. A German U-boat sinks off the coast of Brazil. British and American paratroopers are mowed down in France. Well, the first thing that happens is Harry Truman is never thrust into office, and with him the Potsdam Agreement is radically changed. With General George Patton's death, American morale is fractured and progress is slow. Yet British morale is bolstered by news from across the pond. While American troops fight tooth and nail to secure territory, British troops fly back home. 4 days later, Churchill resigns and the new Labour government under Clement Attlee. Hitler learns of the Japanese advance through his radio. Mussolini's dream of an Italian Africa lives on, but not under Italy's flag. Overwhelmed, the Americans withdraw. Their defenses crumbled, and the British are forced to flee to Ireland, where they set up their new government in exile. Even the Irish are unhappy with this arrangement, but they can't afford to make enemies right now. The rest of Britain flees to Iceland, but the Royal Navy is powerless without oil. The Luftwaffe rules the seas. When the city fell, so did millions of people. Infected water and rampant disease cut down the population. By 1948, 6 million people had perished. After occupying French Indochina, the Japanese turned west. They ignored the nuclear threat and attacked the resource-rich Dutch East Indies. Their puppet state of Manchukuo falls apart. The Russian Far East is open season. The Allies no longer control the Pacific. The Americans will still drop the bombs, but on who? At first, it's a stalemate. Neither side wants to make the first move. But then in 1949, the Americans drop the first atom bomb. This changes everything. The Russians feel compelled to respond. And so the space race begins. The arms race ensued. Missiles are launched. A new world order is established. But unlike our timeline, the Germans are firmly in the middle. No one knows. Japan is too strong. China is too far. Korea is left hanging. But if it had, would you be freer or more control? Most countries have a vague idea that something happened afterwards, but a few know what. Some say the Germans won, but they don't really know. Others say he knew he'd lost and planned to disappear. Maybe he just wanted to live out the remainder of his days in peace. Whatever the reason, the legacy of the man still looms large over the country. After all, what if he came back? How could they stop him? In case he tried to seize power again, the groundwork had already been laid for a surveillance state. People are wary of their neighbors. Friendships are kept brief and shallow. Trust is a rare commodity. The US still exists, but how and why? No one really knows. Russia is a superpower, but how did it happen? Everyone is afraid to ask. Millions more live under the threat of famine. The Japanese would also fail to hold their other territories. But why risk losing even more soldiers? Technology has advanced immensely, but no one really cares. Life expectancy is lower because of the constant fear. We must remind ourselves of the lessons of the past. The Germans are careful not to let anyone else tell their story. They have a different version of the forward bunker where Hitler committed suicide. It's a lie. In their version, Hitler escaped and lives out his days on a South American ranch. A nation already starving couldn't risk angering the new ally. Rome becomes another conquered capital alongside Athens, Paris, and Warsaw. That's exactly what happens. When the wall falls in our world, people rejoice. They embrace their neighbors, tear down the barriers that divided their families, and sing songs of freedom. But what if the wall had never been built? What if it was strengthened? This is the darkest possibility of all. But no amount of tanks, planes, or guns can save them. But with the Allies no longer in the picture, who is there to stop them? The leaders of the Nazi Party are brought to justice. Germany has seen the worst of war. It doesn't want to see it again, so it institutes some of the most stringent peacetime laws in history. If a dictator ever comes to power again, this will not stand. The Chinese nationalists and Mao Zedong may unite to form a new communist state, but now they share one enemy. The Japanese emperor is unsure about the future of his nation. But whatever role he plays, he will be a puppet. With fuel rationing in place, the Brits pull out their very last reserves to keep fighting. The RAF fights bravely, but is picking off by German bombers. In fact, the German and Russian economies are more integrated than ever since the eastern states have been liberated. West Germany is free to grow and prosper like never before. What had been a period of immense destruction now becomes a period of immense creation. Germany becomes a powerhouse of Europe, but it's a tightly controlled powerhouse. The German people are suspicious of the outside world. Who could be trusted anyway? As food becomes scarcer, the people become weaker, and the British spirit is broken. The British Empire is officially over. Now the Nazis march on Moscow. This time, there is no retreat. The Soviets are exhausted and demoralized. Those who haven't given up live under the harsh rule of the occupier. But soon they will have company. German troops enter Leningrad, forcing the remaining defenders to flee into the frozen wasteland. At first, he doesn't believe it, but then the denazification of Europe begins. Now, no one is safe, not even former allies. Any anti-Nazi regime will face severe repercussions. Yes, British citizens cheered as their army began coming back from the continent. They were happy to have their boys back. No longer does America stand alone. Great Britain is in this together with them. Without the bomb, Stalin is furious that the Western Allies even set foot in Austria. He'll allow them to stay, but only under the closest scrutiny. No buffer zone for them. But now they don't have to. The British aren't going to stop them. The Indians watched with anticipation as the British left the subcontinent. Finally, their time had come. But what they didn't expect was the price that would be paid. There are casualties of war. In 1943, Adolf Hitler has just secured one of the greatest victories of the war. Yet despite the recent sinking of Allied supply lines to Great Britain, his star is beginning to fall. Soviet forces are knocking at the gates of Berlin itself. And with the US now in the war, he is fighting a two-front battle. Soon he will need every last German to take up arms to fend off both the Red Army and the Anglos. But what if he got just one more lucky break? What if he was able to sink the ship carrying Roosevelt's replacement, stopping the United States in its tracks and turning the tide of the war forever? Let's find out in our timeline. Franklin Roosevelt died in April of 1945, just weeks before Germany's unconditional surrender. But what if the aging president had lived longer? Yet Hitler isn't concerned with any of this. His focus is on the East. Hitler had always known the British wouldn't come to his aid, but now he knows for sure. In fact, the entire world is against him, from Alaska to Vladivostok, from London to Delhi. All eyes are on the leader of the Third Reich. The Soviet Union faces opposition from Japan, who see the distraction as an opportunity to grab some land of their own. On the Baltic, Poland doesn't resist much at all. The Finnish gladly join the Germans. It's too late to reverse the war now. All Hitler can hope for is a quick end. On April, the British surrendered their position in Rang, finally cutting off all oil supplies to the east. Italy leaves the war and quickly finds itself occupied by British and Indian troops. The Americans fought hard, but the Europeans weren't prepared for this type of fighting. All roads lead to the English Channel. Britain wasn't prepared for war when it began in 1939, but it is now fully geared up. In 1945, the Japanese army took Burma and Singapore and began marching across the Malay Peninsula. As the Japanese took over the port city of Calcutta, civilians fled into the countryside. Japan had been a formidable opponent, but now it's an unstoppable force. At first, the Japanese Imperial Army refuses to accept the unconditional surrender. From the ashes of the Third Reich rises a fourth. The victorious Germans begin a program of radical Jews are given back their confiscated property. The new German Chancellor, Joseph Goebbels, institutes a policy of peaceful coexistence with the USSR. Is between the USSR and the USA. Now what is interesting about this alternate 1983, that people still think that the Second World War ended in 1945. Life during the Cold War is tense. The knowledge that it could all end tomorrow hangs over everyone's head. Some say that he predicted the Cold War and simply wanted to avoid it. But what if this feeling was exploited? What if the government turned the collective paranoia into a powerful tool? After all, the Second World War was meant to ensure such a wall would never divide Europe again. History didn't choose that path.